Something happened in Toronto's market last month that almost nobody reported properly because on the surface, July looked like a boring month. Sales were basically flat. Prices drifted down. And if you read one headline, you have concluded nothing changed. But underneath that flat month, the supply side of this market moved harder than it has moved in over a year and moved in the direction that ends buyer leverage. Fewer than 6,000 homes traded across the GTA in July. That part, that's not remarkable. What happened to that number of homes for sale is the story, and it is the one that decides what you pay next spring. 5,995 sales across the GTA in July. Let me show you what is happening behind that number. So sales just shy of 6,000. That's down 0.9% from last July. So basically no change. And for a summer month in this market, unremarkable. New listings were about 14,000. That's down almost 18%. 18%. Sit with the gap between the two numbers just for a second, because that's the entire report. So demand, that held steady. Supply fell by nearly a fifth. Sellers across this region, they collectively decided not to list this summer. And buyers, they didn't leave. When the same number of buyers compete for fewer homes, the result, that's not complicated. TRREB, they said it plainly in their own release. Conditions tightened. Buyers face more competition. And if the trend continues, prices could level off in the second half of the year. That's a board that publishes the data telling you the softening is running out of room. And I want to be precise about where that 18% comes from, because it's the number this whole video rests on. That's TRREB's own, it's their own year-over-year comparison out of this month's report. It matters because the board restates prior year's figures as late sales get reported. So July 2025 numbers in this report are slightly different than one published from last July. I use the current report owns column every month, which means every percentage I give you matches what's on the PDF that I download. And you could download that yourself off TRREB's website. Let's look at the pile of unsold homes, and the same story shows up. Active listings finished in July, about 26,000. That's down 13%, almost 13% from last July. A year ago, this region was carrying about 5 months of inventory. Today, we're at 4.4 months. That's still a comfortable market for buyers, but it's a smaller cushion than it was, and it's been shrinking for months rather than spiking in one report. And here's the other thing. Let's look at the other side, because you deserve the whole picture. Homes are taking longer to sell, not less. The average listings sat about 32 days in July, and that's up from 30, which was a year ago. And by the wider measure, that counts the full time a property has been on the market, and that's still about 45 days, and that's up from 40. So still not a hot market. Nobody's panic buying. And what you have is a slow market getting structurally tighter underneath, which is a very different thing from a slow market getting weaker. So let's dig a little bit deeper. There's a reasonable explanation for why both things are true at once. The homes selling right now are the ones priced correctly for today. And those still take about a month to find their buyers because buyers are being deliberate. Meanwhile, the overpriced listings are not selling at all. They are expiring or being taken off. And every one of those quiet leaves the active pile. Some of that almost 18% drop in new listings is sellers reading the room and deciding not to bother this summer. Days on market rising and inventory falling at the same time is exactly a market clearing out its unrealistic listings look like. The single cleanest way to see is the sales to new listing ratio. That's sales divided by new listings. Below 40%, buyer's market. Above 60%, seller's market. In July, this area, 41%. Last July, 34%. So that's about a 7% move in 12 months. And it just carried the GTA across the line of buyer's market territory, not into a seller's market, nowhere close. But the label that has defined this market for 2 years technically no longer applies. And that happened while everyone was talking about how quiet the summer was. And this is not just one strange month. Let's put 2026 next to 2025 with the same 7 months. And the pattern is unmistakable. January this year was actually weaker than last January, 28% against 31%. Then February crossed over and 2026 has run above 2025 every single month since since then. 36% versus 33% in February. 34% against 29% in March. 34% versus 29% in April. 37% against 28% in May. And 39% against 31% in June. And now 41% against 34%. So that's 6 months straight of this market being tighter than the same month a year earlier, with the gap widening as the years go on. 1 month is noise. 6 months moving the same direction, that's a trend. And this is the cleanest evidence in the report that what you're actually watching is structural than seasonal. Segment by segment, the tightening is not evenly distributed. Houses, I'm talking about detached, semis, and townhouses together, sold just shy of 4,000 in July, with a sale to new listing ratio around 43% and 3.9 months of inventory. That's the tightest part of the market and is where the competition is generally returning first. Condo townhouses sold about 400 with a 40% ratio and 4.9 months of supply, sitting right around the balance line. Condos, talking about condo buildings, sold about almost 1,600 with a 37% ratio and 5.3 months of inventory. Still the softest segment in the GTA. Still the one place where a prepared buyer holds real leverage. And that spread matters more than any single average because it tells you the recovery is starting at the top of the housing ladder and working down. So houses, they tighten first. Condos, tighten last. If you're sitting in a condo waiting to buy a house, that ordering is actually working against you in both directions at once. Worth naming, while the ordering happens, freehold supply is finite in a way condo supply is not. Nobody is building new detached houses in the west end of Toronto. So when listings dry up in that segment, there's no relief valve. Condos have thousands of investor-owned units where the owner deciding month to month whether to hold or sell, plus completions that we've been talking about a lot of my other videos. They're still arriving from projects that started years ago. That's why the condo segment stays soft the longest. And also why the freehold segment can turn quickly once sellers stop listing. If you own in Toronto or you're planning a move the next year, subscribe. I go through TRREB's numbers every single month, segment by segment. So you're making a decision on data instead of headlines. So supply, it fell hard. Demand held. And the ratio crossed the line. The question everyone asked me, what did that do to the price? The average home across the GTA sold just over $1 million in July. That's down 4.5% from last July. And month to month, that's roughly about 55,000 below June. Now, before anyone panics about that number, July is seasonally softer than June almost every year. Last year, the average fell about 4.5% from June to July as well. This is a summer pattern, not a crash arriving in a single month. Remember, we have to look for trends and not some specific number. But notice where the price sits, just barely above $1 million. So the GTA has spent 4 years grinding down from the 2022 peak to the fastest rate shock in modern history. And the average GTA home is still 7 figures. That floor has been tested about as hard as a housing market can be tested. Let's talk about this in property type. Detached, average about 1.29 mil. Semis, 964,000. Townhouses, 817,000. Condos, 636,000. And let's talk about Toronto in the city. When you look at detached in the city, it's 1.5 mil. And every one of those 4 and 6 numbers carries a premium you would expect for land close to the core. So let's compare 416 and 905. And let's talk about where the difference is. In July, 691 detached home sales sold inside the city and at 1.5 million average, while over 2,000 sold in 905 area and the average 1.2 mil. So the gap is about 340,000. And that's the number is the price of staying in the city. And notice the volume as well. There's 3 times as many detached homes trade outside the city as versus inside, which tells you where the family size supply actually exists. And when people in my market say there's nothing to buy, what they usually mean is that there's nothing to buy in the 416 at their price. The condo picture is the mirror image. There's over 1,000 condos sold inside the city, and they average about 672,000 against 510 condos in the 905 area, averaging 560,000. So the city is where the condo inventory lives and is where the softness is concentrated. Let's zoom out to the decade and put July in proportion. So the GT average was about 729,000 in 2016. It ran to 1.18 mil at the 2022 peak. Then in 2023, 1.126 mil. In 2024, 1.117 mil. And 2025, 1,067,000. In July of this year, 1,000,000, about 3,000. So 4 straight years of decline. But look at the shape of that line rather than the direction. Each year's drop is smaller than the one before. This is not a market falling off a cliff. It's a market decelerating toward a floor. And the July supply numbers are the first real signals of what stops it. And there's one more number in this report that matters more to my audience than anything else I have said. And almost nobody calculates it. Take the average detached price and subtract the average condo apartment price. That difference is what actually costs to make the jump from a condo to a house, detached that is. And it's a number that decides whether the move-up families I work with can go this year or they have to wait. In July 2025, the gap was 710,000. In July 2026, 655,000. So the distance between where they are and where they want to be has got about $54,000 cheaper over 12 months. But now hold that against everything else in this report. That gap narrowed because condos held up slightly better than detached this year. In percentage term, that is. But the supply data says freehold is tightening fastest at 43% against 37% for condos, which means the mechanism that closed this gap is one that's now it's reversing. If houses tighten and start rising while condos stay soft, that gap, it widens again. And the window you're looking at right now closes from the top. I'm not telling you to rush. I'm telling you that the specific number is the one to watch because it's the real price of your move. And July was probably closer to the bottom of it than the top. So what do you actually do with all this? If you're buying, understanding exactly what changed last month, nothing about affordability improved. The change is that your competition got quietly stronger while the number of choices got smaller. The window where you could take 3 weeks to think about a house, come back and find it still sitting, it's closing. And it's closing fastest on freehold. If you're shopping condos, you still have the strongest hand in this market. 5 months of inventory and sellers who need to move. Use it now rather than assuming it lasts.